Hey, I'm Brooke Halliday, licensed professional clinical counselor and your host of Coloring Outside the Lines. I believe that we are the byproducts of our experiences and the environments in which we were raised, and most of us have earned a few scars from those things over the years. I've been making it my mission to help people learn to accept themselves and have compassion for everything that they've survived. Through deep and vulnerable conversations with some amazing women, you're going to hear about major moments in their life when they chose to color outside the lines and demonstrate firsthand just how capable we all are. So get ready to be inspired as we color outside the lines and make something beautiful. Ronna is a colleague of mine in rural Minnesota and has been working as a therapist for over 10 years. She identifies as a brain spotting therapist who helps highly motivated and caregiving women who are constantly pouring into others to feel less overwhelmed and reclaim their self-worth and realign with their values. To better be able to help more women, she recently released a program that she created called Redefine, Rewire, Realign. Learn more about Ronna's program in the show notes. Today, Ronna is telling us about her experience with getting divorced in her mid-20s and what she learned about herself from surviving that experience. Let's just kick off. Tell me your backstory.
So I was in college. I'm trying to think if I was 20 or 21. Definitely before 21. So I think I was 20 when I met my first husband, and we met through mutual friends because my friend Amber was dating his best friend or one of his best friends. And so we kind of had all hung out and went out, and it started out, things were really good. I was at college in Mankato and he was back home.
Back home being like Alexandria?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And was there like an initial draw to him? Like if you guys hung out in like a friend space before, or was that something that built over time?
I think it built over time but we were just really committed to each other in a sense of like, we wanted to hang out with each other. And there was that very intentional like communication because we were 3 hours apart. Mm-hmm. And so we made an effort on weekends to be able to see each other when we could. And it was really convenient that all of our friends and our friend group, we all got along so well together. We all enjoyed some of the same things. I mean, your typical rural Minnesota teenagers, young adolescents, ice fishing.
Are we talking like drunk in a field? Is that
give or take some?
Been there. Know how that goes.
And so, I mean, we just had a lot of fun, right? Like when I think about like when people ask the question, what age would you go back to? Definitely early 20s, because you still don't have a ton of responsibilities and life is just kind of carefree. And so that's where we were at in that stage of life. And it was good.
Did you have future plans? Like, I know you said you were going to school. Like, did you know exactly what you wanted to do with your life? Did he know what he wanted to do with his life?
Yeah. So I was definitely on the track to graduate college, my undergrad early, with the plans on getting my master's. And so that was already in the works. I already had kind of like my sights set on that, and he was totally okay with it. He never did any schooling after high school graduation and just kind of laborer into the workforce, hard worker, super smart and like dedicated, and had done well for himself. He, had a house and all of the things already at that point and stage in his life. So that was kind of like our home base, like where we would go back to and where we would hang out. Other than like a laborer type position, he had never like spoke of anything beyond that. So yeah, we would kind of commute back and forth and hang out with one another. We dated for 8 years. So,
oh, wow. That's a long time.
Yeah. So we kind of went through a lot of different transitions together as a couple, as friends, because we were in that stage of life where a lot of friends were getting married at the same time. So I think there was a year span where we were in 5 different weddings.
Oh my gosh.
Like as bridesmaids or groomsmen or personal attendants, whatever. Like it was just like a really busy, fun, exciting celebrations between like ourselves and also our friend group. And so we had lots of things to look forward to.
Did you guys feel the pressure to get married then if everybody around you was getting married? 8 years is just like a long time to date.
Yeah. Because we dated, so I was in college. So I like my 2 years left of undergrad, we dated, and then all throughout my master's. And then while I kind of got some of my first jobs back here when I moved back. So I don't necessarily know there was like a pressure to get married right away, just because I knew that I wanted to get those things squared away. Like I wanted to have a career, I wanted to have a full-time job before like that was going to be the next step.
You had
And
like a timeline and a checklist.
yeah, of course I did.
Okay. Well, most women do, don't we? So,
Yes. So, and kind of once all of those things were kind of checked off, it was kind of like that question of like, okay, well, now what? Like, what happens next? And so we did get engaged, and it was a very anticlimactic engagement. So it was not really a, I don't know, whimsical story or I
like,
don't know.
he rolled over in bed and pulled a ring out of his nightstand and
Yeah.
was like, "Here, I forgot to give this to you."
Yes. Like legit.
Stop. No.
Legit.
No.
Legit.
I can't with that.
So there wasn't anything like down on one knee or anything like that. But we had already been together for so long, like it just seemed like the next logical thing to do because like we were still happy being together. And we had a longer engagement just because of how things played out for whatever reason. I can't really even remember now at this point in time. But and so it wasn't until like as we started planning things where there was just like a little piece of me deep down that was like, is this right? Is this right for you? But it was almost like so deep into it that like, oh, those are just like little jitters or those are just little anxious
Ooh,
thoughts.
tell me more. So, like, what are we talking? Like, you're picking out like table settings and you're like, actually, I don't know about this. Or like, what can you remember about when you had that first thought?
Like driving home from work one day, just like, is this really what I envision my life being? And I couldn't really answer that question. So it wasn't like we got into a huge fight and like bad things happened. It was just kind of like this little like birdie or like this little gnawing voice that was just kind of like, is this right?
Did you tell anybody that you had that thought?
I don't think so. No, actually, I think that's probably the first time I've ever brought it up.
Oh, okay. And so
Yeah.
when you're thinking like, is this the life that I want? Like you had done the job, the career, now you're going towards marriage. So like what about that didn't seem like it was fitting anymore?
I think it came down to, I won't say his personality. I think it came down to like how we meshed together. Like as a, like I always envision more. I always envision like, okay, what's the next step? Okay, like how can we make this better? How can we
Continued improvement rather than settling and being content for 50 years.
Right. Right. And I feel like he was more in the stage of like, okay, this is good. Like, yep. Like there wasn't a lot of effort to grow. There wasn't a lot of effort to, yes, he was a hard worker. And yes, he was kind of like a jack of all trades and could do lots of things. And we enjoyed our time together and whatever else. But it wasn't ever like,
You couldn't dream together.
yeah. So it just kind of felt like we were on a different playing field. So then, I mean, we got married. The wedding was beautiful. Things were good.
Did you ever have another thought of, do I really want to do this again? Like standing at the top of the aisle or anything?
No, I remember like going to the ceremony and my brother drove me to the ceremony on our wedding day and there was like anxiety just washed over me. And I think I would imagine majority of people have that sensation and feeling. So it wasn't like I pinpointed it to like, you shouldn't do this. It was more like, whew, wow, I'm going to be in front of a bunch of people and doing like a really vulnerable thing. That was more the anxiety. But I do remember having a little bit of like, whew, pit in my stomach, hard to breathe moment
Now,
as we were driving there.
anytime I have driven someone to their wedding, and I've done it a few times in my life, I always turn around and look at them and say, do you want me to keep driving this car? Did your brother do that for you at all?
I don't remember.
Okay.
He may have. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, let's do this. Right.
Okay.
And I mean, like all of the things. And I think that day, when I think about our wedding day, I think I was just so anxious. There was just so much going on. Looking back, I wish I would have paid more attention to like the little moments. Like our first sneak peek of seeing each other was like super rushed and we never even got to enjoy that moment. So there was just a lot of things where I wasn't as intentional. Hindsight 2020, was that telling? I don't know.
Right.
But it was just kind of like rushing through the day of like, hey, ceremony. Okay, now we get to go bar hop. Okay, now we get to go to the reception. And now we get to go to the dance, all that kind of stuff. After the wedding, we just kind of got into, we never went on a honeymoon right away. It was a couple months later that we went on a honeymoon, and all of that was good and things were great for a while. But then slowly things we just kind of started to like disengage a little bit from one another.
Are we talking like feeling like roommates being in the same house, or like going outside of the house, like hanging out with other people? What is that looking like for you at that time?
Probably a little bit of both. So, I
Okay.
mean, to set the stage a little bit, I was graduated college and my master's, so I had lots of school debt. And so that meant me working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, depending on what the season was. And so I would do my full-time job. I'd go and waitress until 10 or 11 at night. I might hang out with coworkers for a little bit after the fact and then go home and then get up and do it all over again. And then on weekends, sometimes there was coaching. Sometimes there was waitressing, you know what I mean? So I was trying to do my due diligence to financially be responsible, but I think that left little time for us as newlyweds to really engage with one another.
Did you guys ever have a conversation about debts and what that would look like? Or was it just kind of like, I went to school, I'm going to pay for this? Or was
Yes,
there a
it was very
conversation?
much, things were just very much divided. Like his stuff was his stuff, my bills were my bills, and we didn't really like mesh things together, which I was okay with. I mean, I'm kind of like that independent side of me, whereas like my school debt isn't your responsibility to have to figure out, because there was other things that he was paying for
Hmm.
that, like the mortgage and other things that I got to reap benefits of.
Yeah.
So I was just working a lot, and, being in your early 20s or mid 20s, what do you do on the weekends? Well, that involves alcohol and going out. And it just kind of like I would be working and then he would be out. And so it was just kind of like that disengagement started to happen. But then things just started to get a little bit more distant. And like my intuition
I was
started
just going to
picking
say,
up.
did
Mhm.
it either of you two address that there was a growing distance or disconnect?
I think we did. And so we would try to do some weekends, but I don't know. Like my intuition was already like something's different. And his emotions started to get a lot bigger, and I didn't have a lot of patience for that. And so, like, when I say emotions got bigger, like if we got into a fight about something, like it would turn into not necessarily like scary, but it would turn into like a lot of yelling and a lot of defensiveness and a lot of never a point of something isn't working. What can I do different? And I feel like I was immature at the point too, where I wasn't ever making those types of connections either, of like, oh gosh, what do I need to do? Maybe I need to not work the 3rd job so that we can spend time together. Like I wasn't willing to give that up either. So there was a lot of butting heads. And so just
Again, hindsight, and like you guys are baby adults at this point in time still.
right. Super young. And I mean, I think playing into it, how we grow up and the relationships that we see probably played a role into that. So there just didn't seem to be a lot of intentionality, well, on my behalf or his.
Hmm.
But of course, I saw more of his and at that point in time than I saw my own. And so I think I just started to get really resentful and just kind of irritated. I remember making some pretty mean comments that were like intentional to be hurtful.
How do you
But yeah,
feel about yourself now looking back and like seeing your behaviors? I'm curious your perspective.
I don't want to say the word embarrassed, but like I definitely would have done it different, but I know more now. Like I
Right.
have more information, I have more skills, I better understand myself, I better understand that dynamic as I've reflected on it, of how I could have supported him differently in those
Hmm.
moments and vice versa, right? So we just kind of started doing our own things. Like, yes, we would still hang out, but then it started to be like snarky, sarcastic comments that went too far, and they would just entirely piss me off. So then sassy, snarky Ronna would come out and I would bite back, and it just started to get really yucky.
Are you guys doing this in front of people, or is all of this happening behind closed doors?
His was in front of people. My stuff was behind closed doors.
Oh, I mean, neither would be a good option, but both.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So like he would say it and then I would, so like if we were out with friends and he would say something, I would just like, I would shut down instantly because I would be so hurt. And then when we would get home, I would circle back and be like, oh, by the way, you don't get to say that shit to me. And then it would turn into why he said it and the defensiveness and all those kinds of things, which just, it was unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
So with that, again, like my intuition just kind of started to get the best of me because then it was even less like talking throughout the day. When we would get home, we would just sit on the couch and scroll on our phones, or we would just like kind of be doing our own thing with the TV on in the background. Like there wasn't a ton of connection.
At
And
that
I
point in
was
time, were you thinking about leaving or making a change, doing anything different, or were you just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping?
crossing my fingers and hoping.
Mm-hmm.
I think like I was into it. Like I got married to get married. We're in
The
this for the
list.
long haul.
Mm-hmm.
So then there was one time I was waitressing and I got home and he was passed out on the couch because he had been drinking out with the guys all day. And his phone was on the counter and there was getting a ton of text messages on that phone.
Okay.
And so curiosity got the best of me because, again, my intuition was already like, he's hiding something, like something's up. And my suspicions were confirmed because he had gotten quite a few text messages from another gal. Sadly, somebody that I knew and somebody that I
Oh,
previously used to work with. So it was just kind of like
what's going through your head at that moment?
like my body physically just like I'm sure my face got super white, my stomach just like clenched up, my heart broke.
Of course it did. You're fine. Take your time.
So I played into it that evening
Okay.
for a bit
Okay.
because I wanted to have as much information as I possibly could to confirm or really understand what was happening and what was going on. And so I pretended to be him in these text messages going
Not
back and
uncommon.
forth.
Yep. Not uncommon for people to do.
Yep. And I got some more dirt, let's call it.
Okay.
And realized it had been going on for quite a while.
Like how far into your marriage?
Maybe like 6 months into our marriage.
Okay.
It had already started. And honestly, Brooke, I think it even happened when we were engaged or when we were dating.
Ooh.
Again, hindsight.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that night, I mean, like I said, he was passed out. So I grabbed my phone, his phone, and I left. This is like 1:00 in the morning. And I left and I went to my brother's house. And I like woke them up. Like I'm sobbing. I'm a complete disaster.
Oh, yeah.
What do I do? And so we talked it through. This is just super funny, something that I remember about my brother, and like he's still this kind of a guy to today. But like, so what are you gonna do about it? Like, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. Like, I legit just found out my husband is having an affair. And
That sounds like a family trait to be like, and what are you going to do about it? So that makes sense. That's what you got.
yeah. And so I stayed there just for a couple of hours. I mean, now it's like 3 a.m. I'm not gonna sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of went driving around. Oh, I forgot. She called me. Well, she didn't call me. She called the phone.
Okay. I was like, she did what?
Yeah. No, she called the phone as I was on my way to my brother's house, right? Like I had already kind of confirmed some suspicion. I never said that it was me in the text messages. And so she called and I answered and I was like, oh, hey. And she hung up.
No.
So what did I do?
I hope you called her back.
I sure did call her back. Of course, she didn't answer. But anyways, here nor there. Yeah. So then I went to my brother's and I was there for a few hours. By this time, it's like, 3, 4 in the morning. And I I didn't know where to go or what to do. And so like I drove around for a bit, and then I did end up back at our house, and he was still sleeping. But at this point in time, like you don't get to sleep anymore.
Correct. Absolutely not.
Yep. So I went barreling in the house, and it was not a productive conversation, but it was I needed to get these feelings out, and you need to tell me what the hell's going on kind of a conversation.
Did he admit it?
Well, I had so much evidence, things for him to be able to deny it at that point. Like he would have been pretty foolish. Because I had already like put so many pieces together. So he admitted it at that point in time. And I was sad. He was sad. It was a hard day. I told him I was going to move out. And so I did. And I moved in with my parents for a couple of weeks. And we kind of like worked on trying to talk. I mean, at this point, he's like on his knees begging me to stay and all of these things, which, okay, fine. I mean, makes sense.
Where was your head at? Did you want to work on it? Were you ready to call it quits?
I had no idea. I was so confused and kind of like still in shock that I just needed some space and some distance to just like wrap my head around it a little bit. And so like after a couple of days, I had kind of shared with him like a few different things that I expected and that I wanted to happen. And I can't even tell you what those things are. I know one of them was like talking to my parents about it. Like he needed to go to my parents and talk about what happened and apologize. So he did that.
Why was that important for you, for him to apologize to your parents?
Because I think it was my hope it would like show that he was taking responsibility for how he hurt me. Because I also think like as close of a family as we are, like it doesn't just hurt the person that's in the relationship.
Right.
That it's like that ripple effect. So he did that. He did go to my parents and talk to them. But I remember like the tables being turned that it was my fault because I was working and I wasn't coming home right away and that I wasn't putting energy into the marriage.
Did any part of you believe that narrative?
Maybe a little bit. I know he needs to take full responsibility for the choices he made. And again, like, I can recognize that neither one of us were pouring into the marriage
right
the way that we needed to. So that's kind of where like my mind was for the next, like for those 2 weeks that we were a part of, like, okay, how are we going to grow this? If we're going to make this work and we want to make it work, what do we need to be doing different? And that was like being more intentional, making time for one another to talk about stuff. So, I ended up moving back in and things were okay. I mean, they were still kind of like that awkward, like I'm still really, really hurt. I don't know what you're up to. I'm still trying to like give you space, but yet I don't really trust. So that kind of awkwardness. He was still kind of like angry. I can't tell you exactly what about, but it would be any time that I would have any type of criticism or request or I don't like how this is going, it would turn
He was on pins and needles too.
Right.
Got it.
So it was just kind of like this really awkward, hard dynamic of like, okay, well, we're going to keep trying. And then we went on like a little weekend getaway thing, like up to Brainerd, just try to get away and connect with one another. And it was okay. But then there was like this point in time, we were at a coffee shop and we were trying to figure out where we were going to go and what we were going to do for the day. And like neither one of us had patience for one another. And so I remember I had like a phone number on my phone and I had to repeat the number to him. I think like in my mind, probably 10, but in reality, maybe it was like 4, but like, you can just tell like the impatience that I had. And so then I got really snarky and I said something like, well, aren't you even listening to me? And then that kind of put up his wall and his defensiveness. And so he said some mean things. I shut down. I went back to the vehicle, like, and I totally stonewalled silent treatment. And he just drove us back home. So we drove home for an hour and a half in complete silence, got home. I still wasn't ready to talk. And so I went for a walk.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine sitting in that car for an hour and a half and not saying anything. I feel like I would have gotten out and been like, I'll just hitchhike. Thanks. If I die, it is what it is.
I know, but I think like my stubborn nature of like, I'll sit you out. Like,
I mean, good for you. It's way safer than hitchhiking. So,
but yeah, so that was kind of like January-ish. And there just wasn't a lot of trust, right? Like trust was completely shattered and broken. And then February, it was Valentine's Day. Now that I'm remembering, it was Valentine's Day. I got a call from her husband.
oh my goodness.
And he shared with me that.
Had you thought about calling him and telling him at any point in time, like small town stuff? I didn't know if that ever crossed your mind.
No, I don't think so. No, I did. I did tell him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did. This was so long ago, Brooke.
I mean, that's fine. You're doing great.
Yeah. So I did tell him, but so then this time around, I think like that heightened his suspicions. And so then they were in there navigating their shit out. But yeah, it was Valentine's Day and he called me and said that it was still going on and that they were meeting up and whatever else. So I left work early because I like was in no way able to function.
Right.
At all whatsoever. And I went home and I packed up a bunch of stuff and I like moved out, quote unquote.
So you didn't even have a conversation with him. You just took this other guy's word for it and were like, bye, peace.
Well, I packed up my stuff and like I waited for him to come home.
Okay.
And I said, just so you know, he called me today and let me know that you guys are still talking. Glad you're choosing her over me. You know, like it was something pretty like, F you, man.
Yeah.
So then from there, like I moved out to my parents and I stayed with them. And that was the nail in the coffin. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. What's the saying? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you.
No, I think it's the other way. Shame on, I don't know. Anyways, I know what you mean.
Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever.
Words are hard.
Words are hard. They are.
Yeah. So it was kind of like that. Okay. Would it be hard to forgive after one time? Absolutely. But breaking the trust again after we had acknowledged that we were going to work on it, we were going to do something different, and he still chose to do that. It just felt like a total stab to the heart.
So at that point, you're completely done. Like there's no coming back from this. Okay, so then how do you move forward with the divorce process at that point in time?
I think I gave myself a little time to really make sure that that's what I wanted. I don't want to say I shut myself out from my friends, but I didn't want that noise.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted the decision to be for me.
Do you think they would have encouraged you to stay?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't want that noise because I'm definitely a person who I like to have other people's validation to know that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that if I made this choice, that it was because I made it, not because I was encouraged or validated from other people.
Understandable. Totally understandable.
Yeah. So that was February. And by July, the divorce was final.
Was it pretty straightforward?
Yeah. And the funny part is he started dating somebody new before our divorce was even final.
Perfect. Love that for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it didn't take long. I mean, like I had said before, like financially, things were still very separate. I moved into his house, so I didn't want anything to do with that. Like his vehicle was his. I mean, we're mid-20s at this point, right? So our retirements aren't anything of substantial nature. So like you have yours, I have mine. So everything was just pretty easily divided, and we just moved forward from there. And I went to an attorney, and I just wanted to make sure that I was signed, sealed, delivered, done. Like I didn't want anything I was done. I was really done. So then it was a journey of what does this look like being 26, married and divorced it was less than 2 by the time, you know what I mean? But I found out about the affair, like, wow, it was still like within our first year of marriage. Married for less than 2 years in my first marriage. Like there's a lot of shame.
Did you guys have plans in terms of kids and future, or had that not been talked about at 26?
It was, and I was actually off birth control at the time, but sex was kind of non-existent for us at that point. I think because we were both so disengaged from one another. I'm not emotionally there, so like, don't touch me.
Yep.
So
fair.
Purposely going to bed later than he would, or maybe not purposely, but you know, just our schedules weren't lining up and we weren't intentional about it.
Yeah.
So after kind of like things getting solidified, just making sure that I took care of me. And
what did that look like for you?
Living with your parents as an adult after you lived on your own brings some challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I love my parents, don't get me wrong. And again, living on your own independently and then living with your parents again, I was like, I need my own place. And so I think the first part of that process was buying my own house and just kind of trying to take care of me. And so exercising and kind of getting into that routine. And what does this look like to be a single mid to late 20s adult woman? How do I go about doing that?
Was your friend network still the one that was so deeply intertwined with him and his life?
Yeah. So that was hard too. That's a really good question because like we had a group of friends, there was like 6 of us, right? 3
Mhm.
girls, 3 guys, all super great friends. And so I kind of felt like they were my best friends and they still are.
Mhm.
I feel sad for them because they navigated that really gracefully. They did.
Oh, good. Because that could have gotten really nasty too.
To be fair, I think they were all pissed at him.
Well,
So like
yeah.
maybe I reaped the benefits a little bit and maybe I felt their grace a little bit more than he did. I felt like they were respectful in the sense of like I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know what he was up to. I didn't want to know what he was doing. But again, like I said, before our divorce was even final, like he was already dating somebody new. And so like his time and energy and effort was hanging out with her.
Yeah.
So I think he kind of pulled himself away from all of us. Because I think he was ashamed and embarrassed for his actions and what he did.
Yeah. How could you not be?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess some people aren't, so I shouldn't say that, but like, you have to imagine a person that you married had to have some redeemable qualities at some point in time.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so then I signed myself up for a triathlon in the midst of all of this.
Because emotional pain, let's add the physical shit on top of it.
Exactly. Yes. And that was just kind of something like a distraction to pour myself into rather than just being sad all the time. And then I got my house and that was really exciting and that was awesome. And then I got my dog because animals make things better.
Yeah, those dogs that we get when we have broken hearts,
Mhm.
they're something else. I have one of those too. So
Yeah. They're special. And I remember my mom saying to me, so my mom's a little rough around the edges sometimes. And she goes, why in the hell would you want to get a goddamn dog? And I responded and I said, Mom, so I'm not a lonely sap. That's why.
Oh,
So Boston and we went on a lot of runs and a lot of walks. She was my child and she was like my distraction for sure.
I'm glad you had her.
And she is still here with us.
Yay!
She's very old now at this point, but we're hobbling along.
Those dogs, yeah, they hold a special place. It's going to be a rough period of time when all of us brokenhearted girls lose our emotional support dogs. So
Yes.
I don't look forward to those days.
No,
so
I
at
don't
what point did you decide, like, I'm getting back out there, I'm going to date, I am trying this again?
It was a little while. I mean, I was really distracted with my house and with the triathlon that I was like kind of screw you, men.
Fair. Very fair.
Yeah. But then summer came. That first summer, nothing really, but then kind of like that winter and then that next summer. I kind of feel like I got wild.
Whatever.
I got wild and did like I was hanging out with great people and I'm still friends with them and I still love them dearly, but we definitely were out at the bars often and doing that kind of stuff. Looking back, I mean, I don't necessarily all people come into our life for a reason and we do things for a reason because we're doing the best that we can in the moment, but looking back, could I have handled those maybe months differently? I could have, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
So yeah, kind of like that summer.
So I know that you're married now, and so I'm curious how you and your husband ended up meeting.
Well, there was one long-term relationship in there before I met my now current husband, and that was 2 years.
Did you guys ever talk about marriage?
He did, but it was like, okay, ex-husband was on this end of the spectrum, and this new guy that I dated was like on this end of the spectrum. So I think I was trying to find like this, okay, you're so different. Maybe this is it. It didn't work out. Like it was not. Yes, we dated for a while and he is a super kind and loving guy, but he was not for me at all. So then after that, again, I was at this point, I was like focusing on me. This is going to be all about me. And then kind of warded guys off for a while again. So I met Matt through mutual friends. I mean, being in a small town, he was on the fire department. My dad was on the fire department at the time. And so there's just lots of events that go along. And so just kind of met through there. And he had reached out to me on Facebook Messenger, asked if I wanted to go out for some drinks.
Okay.
And I was like, sure. But again, at this point in time, I'm not dating. I'm taking care of me. I don't want to date anybody. And so my
why'd
one
you
friend
say
was
yes
like,
to him?
because I was going to cancel later so that I could say
Oh.
yes so they can leave me alone. So then I was talking to my one friend. Well, actually, so then the day came and I was like, hey, sorry, my schedule's too busy. I can't make it. Oh, shoot, we'll have to reschedule. Okay, whatever. And then 2 weeks later, he reached out again. Persistent little guy. And so at that point, it was like a Saturday or something. And my one friend, she was like, Ronna, what do you have to lose? And I was like, my pride. I have my pride to lose because I said I was done. I wasn't going to date anybody for a while. And she's like, just go. It's a drink. Just go. We went out for a drink and here we are 7 years later.
Was there any growing pains with regards to learning to trust him, or were you like able to trust him right off the bat?
Well, we had a unique situation because that was like November when we met and we went on that date. And he was leaving for basic in February. So we had December, January, and part of February. And so we were like, okay, no commitment. There's no expectations at all whatsoever about this time. And so I think we both went into it just like, okay, this is fun. I mean, we jokingly said that we were just business partners.
I love that.
And so then when he left in February, again, like there was no expectations of like keeping in contact. There was
He didn't want to get a Dear John letter.
I don't know, probably. And so I was kind of like, okay, whatever. It is what it is. But so he was gone for 6 months. Surprisingly, within like the first like month that he was gone, he wrote me a letter.
Oh,
I know.
yay.
And so then I wrote him a letter back. And so then it just kind of started that we were weekly writing each other letters. And so we have all of them, which is still really cool. But yeah, so when he got back, it was like August, I think was the timeline. Maybe not quite. Yeah, August. And then we went on a trip to Door County and we were kind of like, okay, either this is going to go really good or we're going to hate each other. And so we'll figure it out from there. And we're still together. So
How long have you guys been married now?
we got married in 2017.
7 years. Oh, okay. Math is hard for one of
6.
us.
6 years. 6
Okay,
years. Math. Hey, I'm a social work major, not a math major.
That's fair.
But we've always kind of done things a little bit backwards because I got pregnant before we were engaged. And that was kind of a fluke deal because I was switching birth controls and we weren't very safe.
And then you had your son. He's your oldest, right?
Yeah. At 8 months pregnant, probably a hormonal breakdown. I'm not really sure. But I said we needed to be married before I had the baby so that our last names would match on the birth certificate. So we planned our wedding in 2 weeks. So we did it. I bought my wedding dress off of Amazon. I mean, a maternity wedding dress off of Amazon, right? Like,
Right.
and of course, I left the tag on it and sent that sucker back.
100%, because you would never wear it again.
So we joke about that a little bit, that I was kind of shotgun wedding, but planned. And it was super small and intimate. Like we just had his parents and my immediate family there. And we didn't invite any of our friends. We actually didn't even tell any of our friends. So until after we were done and married. And not because like we wanted it to be a secret, but I think we just wanted it to be intimate and we just didn't want all the extra noise and whatever else. And so we've always like envisioned having some type of a big reception and party to do all of that. But the other side of me going through my first wedding and that being as big as it was and as overdone as it was, like this intimate marriage and ceremony was so much more meaningful and impactful than the first time around with that many, like 500 people.
Yeah, that's what me and Sean did too. I was like, I cannot stand in front of that many people. And so we will have, I don't know if we had like 20 people there. And I was like, that's all I can handle. But yeah, we watch our wedding film every year. And I'm like, I'm so glad we did it like that. It's just so much more meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we had, so that was December 2017. We had Ryder end of January 2018. And then Miss Little Lena came along in July of 2019. Here we are.
On the other side of divorce and reconfiguring your life. And so do you have advice you would give to somebody else in that situation or to younger self?
I think the advice that I would give, I really wish I would have trusted myself more, but because of like fear of letting other people down, I continued to stay the course rather than listening to like my intuition and like listening to myself.
Are we talking like the intuition all the way back to when you were driving home from work? Like, do I want this? Okay.
Yeah. And I also think too, like, although divorce is really hard and bittersweet and yucky, that it was almost a necessary evil in my story. Because there was a lot that I learned about myself throughout that process, about who I want to be as a person. I mean, because there were some things that I did like in the between time that I kind of look back and like, oh man, I really could have treated myself better, and took care of myself in a completely different way. But again, we don't know what we don't know until we know.
Right. How about for the people in your life? It sounds like you had some good support people. And so for people who are trying to support someone either deciding to get divorced or actively going through a divorce, how did people show up for you in a way that was helpful?
I think not trying, like I made it really clear that I didn't want, not that I didn't want their opinion. I just wanted them to like to be with me and not like, oh yeah, he's an asshole kind of a thing for doing that. They may feel that way and that's fine, but I was still really sad and still really loved him. So I couldn't like just put that hat on to say, so just being there with the people, watch a movie or like some type of a distraction. I mean, not just sitting in a quiet room.
Staring at each other like this.
Right. Keep inviting people. Because I know that there was a lot of times where I didn't take them up on invitations just because I wasn't feeling it.
Absolutely.
So because I think there's, you know, when I look getting married and then getting a divorce so soon, like I felt like I didn't try hard enough. And so kind of when I think about looking back and what I would say to myself in that moment, I know I needed to go through that so I could show up and be a different person and I could grow and also know the kind of wife that I need to be in order to have a successful marriage. So that was a big learning curve and piece of like, yep, I can be independent and I can have my own finances and do my own job and also be supportive and validating. And that doesn't take away from being there for them.
Yeah. Thank you for telling me this.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I know it's hard to talk about, like sometimes those like change moments in our life, although they're big and they really make us who we are, it can be really hard to talk about them because growth is fucking painful sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
and like, yeah, I'm talking about it today and I still get teary-eyed about some of those things. But I also like, I remember it probably took me a good 4 years to truly heal from that.
Yeah, because
so,
tears
like,
don't necessarily mean that you haven't healed. It's just,
right.
It's a sensitive area and probably always will be in your life and in your story. Thank you for being brave and putting this out there. I know lots of women kind of struggle to make that decision of, do I stay? Do I go? I made these vows and what does it say about me if I leave? So thank you for being willing to share your story. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I know that the topics that we talk about on this podcast can be heavy and bring up a lot of emotions for people, and that's no reason to shy away from these conversations. If you're a fan of trying to get these conversations out to as many people as possible, I could use your help. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast helps it reach more people. I always love to hear your feedback on the episodes that we put out and the topics that you want to hear more about. So head to www.redbirdcounseling.mn.com. From there, you can send me an email and join our online email community to get more updates about the podcast and everything happening mental health and Redbird Counseling. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Redbird Counseling MN and Facebook Redbird Counseling MN21. Until next time, remember, you're not alone, your story matters, be kind to yourself, and don't be afraid to color outside the lines.